We are joined now by Chris Rufo, Senior Fellow, Director of the Initiative on Critical Race Theory at the Manhattan Institute. His new book is out today, America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. And Chris, we'll get to the book here in a sec, but I wanted to start with the news, obviously, of the day that came out. What do you think is behind Democrat attempts to charge Trump with, now it appears, felonies in Washington, D.C.? We know South Florida. We've already seen New York City. Atlanta also seems likely. What is their game plan here in your mind?
I mean, they want to permanently and irrevocably disable President Trump from any power in the political process and certainly any chance at getting into political office again. I mean, he is, in their view, an existential threat to the country, they say, but really to their interests. And so the strategy they're deploying is pretty simple and yet pretty sophisticated. It's to deploy as many charges in as many jurisdictions as possible, knowing that for the most part, when you're charged with a federal crime, you are either pleading to the federal crime or convicted of the federal crime. Federal prosecutors have an enormous success rate in prosecuting cases. So they do 40 charges here, 40 charges there, a couple charges here, get in front of as many judges as possible, flood the zone with lawsuits. That's their strategy. I don't think that there's much subterfuge. I think it's a pretty open and
shut. Do you think they want Trump to be the nominee?
I think that they want to do two things. They want to disable him either through the media prior to any potential successful prosecution by delaying that, hanging it over his head, making voters fear that the president or the presidential candidate could be convicted at any time. I think that's probably more the immediate strategy. And I think that they also know that it helps them with the base. I mean, the base sees how illegitimate and how destructive and how vindictive and political these prosecutions have become, not just against President Trump, but even launching FBI investigations against parents who opposed critical race theory, against other people who oppose the orthodoxy, certainly on social media and other venues. And so they're really flexing their power, they're flexing their control. And in their gambit, it's a win-win-win. They can't lose from this strategy because they make him more likely to win in the primary, less likely to win in the general, or perhaps even, they believe, they could throw him in prison before he could go into political office again.
All right, the book is America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. We're talking to Chris Rufo. Did you ever think that we would get to a place that is crazy as we are right now, as crazy as we are right now, where, for instance, and I do think this epitomizes where we are, a man could decide that he is a woman and become a women's sports champion? Did you think we'd get here? Where in the world do we go from here?
Well, I mean, the only way out is through. There's no returning to the past. And for conservatives, there's no more pretending that we are the establishment, that we are in a position of institutional power. The key thing you need to understand about the last 50 years in the United States is that the radical left has successfully implemented a long march through the institutions. They've established themselves within the bureaucracies in government, education, public universities, private universities, HR bureaucracies everywhere, and even the corporate C-suite. And so you have to understand the historical progression, how they captured the institutions, how they're weaponizing them with their ideologies, whether it's on race or gender, and then the plan that they have for you, for your family, for your workplace, for your kids. You have to understand where it comes from, how they acquired power, and only then do I think you can actually formulate a plan for defeating it.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic when you look at the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm fundamentally optimistic, and I think the last chapter of my book is really a roadmap for counter-revolution to combat what we're seeing now, which is America's cultural revolution. And I'm optimistic because conservatives still have political power that they can exercise in a much more robust way. We have majorities in state legislatures. We have the governor's mansions in many states. We can revitalize those democratic structures to reform the K-12 curriculum, to give parents universal school choice, to reorient the hiring process and the administration of our public universities. We have these levers of power that are available to us that for whatever reason, it looks like we fell asleep for 40 years, haven't used them. We've got to revitalize them. We've got to give more power back to families, more power back to parents, give them options so they can build counter institutions if they want to opt out of these mainstream left-wing ideological institutions. And ultimately, the public is with us. It's a question of leadership. Do our political leaders know the history? Do they know how we've gotten here? Do they know what needs to be done in order to reconquer these institutions? That's exactly what I do in the book. And so I hope that the book reaches many people, whether it's parents or business owners or political leaders, to say, what the hell happened the last couple of years and what can we do about it?
We're talking to Chris Rufo, the book, America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Last question for you, and we appreciate the time. Encourage people to go check out the book. Certainly COVID, so far, I would say the biggest legacy of COVID going forward has been it made red states redder and blue states bluer. That then leads to more polarization in many ways in terms of the policies that are established through federalism in many different states. Do you buy into that? If so, what should red states be doing better jobs of? You mentioned the legislature majorities. Certainly, a lot of them are now almost super majorities. Should red states go even farther redder? And do you think that accelerates the entire change of the country as a result?
Yeah, I do. I think that red states must become redder in the sense that the policies that they pursue must reflect the values of the voters that put the political leaders in office. And so if voters don't want critical race theory in the classroom, if voters don't want to pay for radical DEI bureaucracies in their public universities, if voters don't want private companies snapping up tax breaks and then condescending and trying to overrule the will of the public in those states, the political leaders should have the courage, the fortitude, and really the self-discipline to go after them in a very dedicated, very focused way. And so we need major institutional reform in this country. The primary venue for that is state legislatures. And so we have to get the will of the voters, the preferences and the values of the voters, and the preferences and the values of the public institutions in alignment. That's the true essence of democracy, and conservatives should not be scared of waging into the culture war, because after all, what else do we have at the end of the day besides a culture? That's what cultivates our kids. That's what raises them up, and that's how we shape our own values and ideas and relationships. So the culture war matters. If you want to win the culture war, get a copy of America's Cultural Revolution right now. It's the #1 bestseller in all categories on Amazon, and I know that your audience in particular would love it.
Awesome. We appreciate the time. Congrats on the book's success, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.